Burning Oak Studios has partnered with Artsee magazine to bring you exclusive coverage of the arts.
Hello and welcome to Artsee Live. I'm your host, Benjamin Farrell. We're very excited today to have with us award-winning, nationally known fine arts and documentary photographer Vaughn Sills. Vaughn joins us today, traveling all the way from Boston, Massachusetts. Vaughn, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks so much.
So, Vaughn, can you tell us about your background in photography?
Sure. I think I was a slow starter in photography. I went to graduate school in photography when I was about 30 years old. Before that, I started at the very tail end of my college education on kind of a lark, just took a class. I thought it would be fun. And then I did it on my own for quite a while, just photographing and built my own darkroom and so forth. And then I decided I would really make the real effort to become a photographer. And I went to graduate school. As I said, I went to RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. But before that, I think what's to me is significant is that I actually studied literature in college. And I believe that that really has informed my sense of pictures and that what I do. I think that my pictures tell stories, or at least it's the story that's in them that I care about a lot. And so that connection of the literature and photography has really been important. I don't really have a traditional art background. I really went from English literature to photography. So that's where that comes from.
Based on your background in literature, how has that affected your photography moving forward?
I've read a lot of stories from the South, about the South. I think another thing that I am deeply interested in is people and who we are. And so that's in stories. People and who we are because of our culture, of course, because of our family, of course. And what I really began to think about in a more concrete way as I got older and I did more work was because of where we live and really the geography, the place in which we live and what a difference that makes in terms of who we are. What happened with this project, with Places for the Spirit, was I also began to see that the place that we live is influenced in a way by who we are and by our culture. So it's really cyclical. It's not just a one-way kind of path, you know. And so the stories, if you read a story, if you read a novel or a short story, the place is so incredibly important. Did I know that when I was 18, 19, 20 years old? I didn't know, of course not. But as I think about it now, I think when I think about good stories, the place is actually incredibly, incredibly important. So maybe it is more related than I have tended to think.
In your new book, Places for the Spirit, how long have you been working on this project?
I started in 1987. It was just a chance encounter. I took a picture without having any background knowledge or intention of doing it. It was that I found myself in a place that was just beautiful. It was mesmerizing. And I was really smart enough, or lucky enough actually, to have my camera and smart enough to take it out. I always tell my students, carry your camera with you, and they don't. I don't know what's wrong with them. You have to have your camera with you. So I was really lucky, and I had all my equipment, you know, tripod and the whole shebang with me. That was the luck. And so I took it out, and I took that picture of that garden. It was B. Robinson's garden. And it was just really beautiful. And so from there, you asked when I started, so from there I I just slowly worked on this as a sideline to another project, or as a, what is the expression? You know, my day job was doing this other project that I was photographing a family for a long period of time. And when I was there to do that, but I wasn't photographing them, I'd go off and I'd look for a garden, just because I loved it, and it was just so wonderful. So that's how it began, and so I began in '87, and it slowly grew and developed, and I think the last photograph that's in the book that I shot for this was in 2005. So I worked on it for nearly 20 years.
Well, that's a big project. Did you have any challenges to overcome?
Finding the gardens. That was the hardest part. They exist, but they're not marked. There's no map that tells you where they are. And so I would go out, I'd get in my car and I'd just drive out to some little town. At that point, I was staying in Athens, Georgia with my friend, Sarah Glickman, and I was doing this other project, photographing the family, but I had a car, so I'd go out in the daytime and I'd just drive off to some new town or some county or whatever, and just look around till I found a garden. And I would try to get back to the family who I was photographing by 3:30 when the kids came home from school. That was my plan. So I go out about 9 o'clock. And if I would feel good if I found 2 gardens, I'd feel really okay if I found one, and disappointed if I didn't find one. I usually did. In Georgia, I really was able to find gardens. But then as time went on, and I was going to other places that I didn't know as much about. I didn't know as much about Mississippi, and I knew nothing about Alabama, really. I didn't know where to go. And so I did some research that I thought would help me, but I really didn't know. And just driving around, sometimes it felt almost aimless. And sometimes I thought, I'm crazy, I've made this up, they don't exist. What's wrong with, I mean, I really would think, I've made this up, it doesn't exist.
How do you see these gardens showcasing African American culture?
Well, one thought I have is that we're very familiar with the fact that jazz and blues have really influenced the music and are really a significant part of American culture. And that's something that's really widely recognized. But I'm not sure how many other ways in which we as the sort of mainstream dominant white culture recognize how much African Americans have influenced who we are as a country. Another way that's recently been recognized is around the quilts from Gee's Bend in Alabama, and I think that is something that is a recent recognition. But to me, the gardens have pretty much not been recognized, and I guess I'm hoping that this will help people see that yes, this is a part of who we are, and there's an influence that has really crossed into white culture back and forth.
Let me share this with you. In the book's introduction, Lowry Pay states, "The gardens give the impression of being forever open to rearrangement, the opposite of European gardens of an earlier era." Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. What Lowry is thinking about is that in the formal gardens of England and France and in Italy, in the Kew Gardens in England, and at Versailles, or the Tuileries, if I'm saying that right, in Paris, in the Boboli Gardens in Italy. The gardens are very formally arranged. They're very beautiful. But they're set up and they're organized and arranged in a manner in which it feels as if they have been that way for 200 years. You know that the plants have grown and died and changed and all of that, but the arrangement is exactly the same. The plan, the orderliness of it is consistent over a very long period of time. And in the gardens that I photographed, there's change, and it really it changes over time. Now, this is one of the differences is that one that he's talking about are formal, and if they're now public, although they may have been made for kings and queens and so forth, but they've been kept exactly the same way. People really want to keep them the same way. And in these gardens, in the African American gardens that I photographed, there's a lot of change that happens over time. A few of the yards I went to a couple of times in the course of years, and they had changed. The objects had come in, they had left, people had rearranged things, people had moved not so much plants, but perhaps added them. And to some extent that may be true in most home gardens, personal gardens, but that's what he was referring to. Maybe that in those gardens from Europe that he's talking about a reverence, a commitment to keeping things the same, rather than a commitment to allowing change, to wanting change, even to hope for change, and that all that means is actually good, not bad.